Hello, I'm the Pink Phantom, and this is my podcast. Join me as I delve into the world of games and gaming, and especially old school RPGs. Together, let's voyage into the astral realm and check out my Phantom thoughts.
Hey, Jason here, calling in on your question about simple versus complex rules and where the line is. I'm using my earpods here. Hopefully they're going to cut down a little bit of the noise. We got construction going on here, so sorry if there's background noise. But, it's a tough question because like you say, even games with a bunch of simple mechanics, eventually they get to where they're complex. AD&D is kind of in that category, I think. So, although some of the AD&D things are a little bit fiddly and more complex, for the most part, it's not that any single thing in AD&D is hard, especially once you get away from high Gygaxian and explain it in layman's terms. But if there's so many different simple rules things in AD&D, and you have to be able to track all the different things, right? BX, I think, falls in that simple category. As compared to AD&D, you have a lower page count, fairly low page count. You have complete game. Marvel Superheroes is a simple game, right? Especially when we talk about the basic set, the yellow original Marvel Superheroes set from, what was that, 84? That is a simple game, really, when you look at it. It's a complete game without question, but the player's books, the battle book's like 16 pages, right? It's that is my go-to for a simple game, this complete game, as opposed to a rules-light game, like say USR or like, I don't know. Anyway, we know what rules-light games are, right? We're lasers and feelings and stuff like that. Now that kind of gets tweaked though, because let's look at something like Swords and Wizardry. Swords and Wizardry, I think, in its simpler versions, are a simple game. And then when you get in the more in-depth versions of it, starts to get complex as you get these rule books over 100 pages and all these options and everything else. It slowly becomes complex just because of all the options. But Swords and Wizardry could be broken down to like Swords and Wizardry Light, which is what, like 2 or 4 pages that Tenkar did, or Complete Light, which is, again, really lightweight book. So, yeah, it's a tough question. I'm really curious to see what other people think. But my go-to example for a simple game would be Marvel Superheroes basic set, the original set. And it wasn't even the basic set back then, I don't think. I think it was just your Marvel Superheroes. Or any of the older TSR stuff, really. The biggest issue with the TSR stuff is some of the earlier things, you have to parse the rules. But once you understand the rules, it's pretty easy. But if you just put OD&D in front of something. Hey, Jason here on follow-up call, because I talked too long on the first one. I cut myself off saying, OD&D probably would be a simple game, the 3 books, if it wasn't the way it's written, right? Which is what all these clones try, like Swords and Wizardry, try to fix, or the White Box Fantastic Adventure game try to fix. I don't know. I mean, I can give you game examples, like Night of the Ninja is not that's a simple game. It's a short page count, and it's another game that needs more editing. Like a lot of these simple games need more editing. I mean, you talk about simple games that are complex and complicated, and We Deal in Lead is that to some degree. We found that when we were playing that we kept having questions. And again, maybe that's because it needs more editing passes. I think editing and formatting and, somebody going at one of these games seriously, keep the rules, but really redo how it's presented would fix the problems for a lot of these games. But the simple versus complex thing, I mean, a core mechanic definitely helps in making it simple because you don't have 30 different separate mini games built in the game. So core mechanic does help. I mean, look at like Pathfinder at its heart, or a lot of these games at their heart are simple games. GURPS at its heart is a simple game, so you start plopping on all the additional subsystems. So it's tough. I think it's almost like pornography, when you see it. I don't know where that line exactly is, Because to me, Boot Hill's a simple game, but somebody else is going to look at it and say, oh no, you need to measure and you need to do this, which you don't. You can play it clear in mind, but other people might look at Boot Hill and say it's complex. I mean, I don't see how you would see that because there's not much there. But yeah, I think that I'm curious to see what people say, because to me it's, a rule book under 100 pages that is clear and easy to understand. But you can point to some pretty complex games, like Top Secret First Edition is under 100-page rule book, and I don't think anybody's going to call that a simple game, even though it's really not that bad until you get into some of the combat stuff. And even that, again, we break into mini games. So, I don't know. Great question.
Thanks for that call, Jason. Some interesting thoughts there. Yeah, you do ask the question sometimes, where does the complexity begin? What are simple rules versus complex rules? And subsystems play a part in that. Page length can play a part in that. You could also have a case where you have a system that is incomplete, so to speak, where gaps are left intentionally for the game master to fill in on their own. Part of the modifying the campaign, customizing the campaign to the table sort of thing. And that in itself can lead to complexity where maybe there was not any before, where the basic rules are not very complex. If it's a rules light system that is complete, or if it's a system that has a fair page count but not a lot of subsystems, but the table that you're playing at, if you're a new player to a table, they have their own rulings. If you're in the OSR sphere that have taken place, that have been added to the rule set, things that you have to learn as you go along. So all of that factors in, and so that makes it, I thought that made it an interesting discussion, and certainly what you've said here is, covers a lot of ground, and I really appreciate your thoughts. And your response, along with just some general ideas I've been having, have actually fed into another way of looking at that complexity that I'll go into later in the podcast. So thank you. In my last episode, I talked about what do you consider a simple rule system? What's simple versus not necessarily meaning a limited number of rules or rules-like game. But what do you consider simple rules? And something that occurred to me this week that could sort of illustrate how defining simple is not necessarily one thing, and that simple and rules light don't necessarily go together, is the notion of how to read percentile dice. Now, I know some of you are rolling your eyes out there already about this, because this is a common little meme to troll people with, and I've done it myself on a Discord. The different ways to read percentile dice. But so you have your tens dice and you have your D10, your standard D10. Well, when you roll the D10 by itself, the D10 usually has numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But when you roll it and you hit the 0, that's considered a 10. So if you're rolling it for damage or what have you, the 0 is a 10. With the tens place dice, you have 00, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. And the 00 is read in almost every case as 0. But when rolling them together as percentile dice, you always treat the D10 0 as 0. But using that logic, if you rolled 0 and 00, that would be 0 and not. So your range on the percentile dice would be 0 to 99 and not 1 to 100. But the traditional way to treat that is as 100, where you just roll all zeros. It's considered 100. But if you read the D10 the same way you read it when you read it by itself, as 10, then by adding the two together, the 00 and the 0 would be 10%, and 90 and the 0 would be 100%. And this has come up several times, and like I said, I've done it before. But I think that illustrates the way we look at that can illustrate about what makes a simple game to an extent, because the rules for reading percentile dice so that 00 and 0 are 100, and a 0 on a D10 is always counted as 0 with anything else, but the 00 is also counted with anything else other than a 0 is counted as 0. That's a lot of zeroing. Can be explained in 3 rules, but with 2 exceptions attached. You roll a D10, you roll the tens dice, and add them together. You read the D10 as you normally do, except for the 0 is read as 0 instead of 10. And you read the tens dice exactly as your eyes tell you it reads, except for when you roll the 00 with a 0 on the 10, you count that as 100. So you've got an exception to what you do, how you read the D10. You have an exception to how you read the tens dice. Whereas the other way, where you're just adding the 2 together and you're counting it the same way, you count the D10, you roll the D10 as normal. You roll the tens dice and always count it as you see it, and then you add them together. So 90 and 0, which is 10, counts as 100. So you can have 3 rules or 3 rules with an exception for 2 of the rules. So on paper, the traditional way with the 2 exceptions is more complex. It's not as simple as just 3 rules, because it's 3 rules with 2 exceptions. But in practice, looking at the dice, if you ask somebody that had never seen the percentile dice, and you just told them you rolled these dice and you add them together to get a result, if they looked at a 90 and a 0, they would say that's 90. If they looked at 3 zeros, then they would assume that's the 100, because there's no hundreds on there. When you showed them the dice, there's no straight 100 on there. So it makes more sense, and it's simpler to learn if you treat it the way with the exceptions. Even though writing it out, it's simpler the other way. So you can have it rule simple, or you can have it execution simple. I think this is what makes it difficult to define sometimes what a simple rule system is, because you can have a system with a lot of rules that still turn out to be very complex, that still turn out to be fairly simple and easy to use, and you can have a rule system with just a few rules that turn out to be very complex because of the way the rules interplay. And when you look at, and a lot of it has to do with who you're writing the rules for, because a lot has been said in some of the older school circles that I see online, that when the original D&D rules were written, when Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson were writing the D&D rules, a lot of people have commented that those rules seem incomplete sometimes, or they seem to be missing something, or there's just a lot of different parts moving together, working together, that don't seem to work together, that you have to learn. But a lot has been said in some of these circles, both by people who have been playing for 40 or 50 years and those who are newer than that to the hobby, but have been playing with an old school style and have been interested in old school style, that they wrote these rules with the idea that the people that would be reading the rules would be coming at it from the same place they are, as members of a wargaming club who had an internal viewpoint, an internalized set of systems or knowledge or instincts of how things work together, particularly in a combat situation, that would fill in the gaps naturally. It's just something you already know. It's something you've already been taught. Whereas people who are brand new to the hobby, who are coming from a non-wargaming background, to them, this is, in some cases, it reads like nonsense. And you can see that in later editions, starting from 3rd edition on, where they were made especially 3rd edition, where they made a intentional change to a D20 mechanic, a unified mechanic. So you're rolling one type of dice. So whenever you come up against some situation and you need to adjudicate what happens, there's a chance of it succeeding or failing, you're going to have a target number, you're going to roll a d20, and you're going to add modifiers to that d20. And that's the way it works for everything. And some people like the unified mechanic and some people don't. But they approached it that way, I believe, because they thought that having a single unified mechanic that you can then just say, here are some examples, or here are some set numbers that you will run across. Going so far to say, assign something that's middle range that people should succeed at most of the time as a 10 or a 12. If it's lower, you can assign it a 5. If it's higher, you can assign it a 15 or 18. To give them one mechanic and a general set of guidelines to use that mechanic. And that would be easier for people coming from outside of the hobby who had not played role-playing games, or people who were coming from a different system that used, say, percentile dice or used D6s or what have you, versus writing rules essentially for the people you play with all the time, the way I think Gary, and a lot of people said, and I agree, that Gary and Dave were doing. They were writing rules based on the groups they had experience with who were experienced wargamers. So what's simple in a game system is not as easy to define as it has a certain number of rules, or it has some very basic rules and you fill in the gaps. You have to know who your audience is. What's a simple rule system to learn for somebody that's ensconced in, the D20 universe is going to be different. It's going to be more difficult for people who aren't, or for people who are not even people who are. And some systems that you talk about, whether you're coming at it from a D20 mechanic aspect or not, there's some things that people who have role played will understand, and they'll be able to translate it into what they've had, versus people who are coming to it completely from outside role playing. So I think that's part of the reason why it's so difficult to define what a simple rule system is, and also difficult to design a simple rule system, because like pretty much anything that you write down that you're putting out there to an audience, you kind of have to decide who your audience is before you start writing. So that was my little thought process I had this week. What do you think? What do you think that there is a way to define a simple rule system that will apply to pretty much anyone that's reading it in a role-playing context? Do you think it does matter if you've had experience in role-playing games or not? Do you think that any game that's written should have a section for newcomers to bring them up to date, sort of, to the mindset they need to play before getting into the deep grist of a system? Should there be, a basic system and an advanced system so that people can start with one and then they can move to the other? Or if they already know a lot about role-playing games, they can just go straight to the advanced. Basic and advanced, that's D&D terminology. It could be as simple as starter set and master set, or that sounds kind of judgmental when you put it that way, or starter set and standard set, or something like that. How would you make a simple system? Or do you think there should be some games that don't have a simple system, that they're for people who have more experience in role-playing before they pick it up to play? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for listening. And now, more from my solo AD&D RPG campaign, Tales of the Dragon Slayers. Day 115 since the start of the Dragon's Rampage, the 10th delve into the keep that they've adopted as their home. The party consists of Katya Rasputin, half-elf, first-level fighter, first-level cleric, fourth-level magic user. Bernie Keebler, elven, first-level fighter, first-level magic user, first-level thief. Sven Svinlig, halfling, first-level fighter, and Harl and Quinn, 2 human first-level rangers. The party returns to the 20 by 30 room that was just past where they encountered the ogres. They unspike the door to the west that they had not explored, and it opens into a 10-foot by 20-foot empty room. With that cleared, they pass through the 20 by 40-foot room, the 20 by 35-foot cave, and the large roughly 90 by 80 foot cave with the untested magic pool in it to the 30 by 30 foot chamber beyond. They go down an previously unexplored eastern passage. There they find a group of 15 gnomes, and as is their usual process, they turn them over to some of their hired guards to take back to where the gnomes are lairing in another part of the keep. Going 60 feet down the corridor, they find a chimney going up. They make a note of its location and go back to the 30 by 30 foot chamber, taking the passage north to the 40 by 40 foot chamber they had previously explored. They then take a southern exit from the southeast corner. It opens into a passage that goes east-west or east 30 feet with a door opening to the south. Going through that door, they get into another hallway which goes a further 30 foot east and then 40 feet north into a large cavern that separates into two caves, one to the west and one to the east. They go to the east and realize when it opens up that they have stumbled upon the giant ant's egg chamber. They surprise the ants and are able to retreat back down the 40-foot corridor to a more defensible position. At this point, I rolled to see what, if anything, was in the other western cave to the western half of that cavern, and there was a creature there, and I just went ahead and determined that the only thing that would be this close to the ant's nest is more of the giant ants. In total, there were 21 workers and 12 soldier ants. These swarmed out of the caves and toward the party. The party won initiative, and Katya was able to cast web. This caught all but 4 of the workers. After 3 rounds of combat, those ants had been killed, though Sven and Katya had both taken hits. The web spell has a cumulative 5% per turn chance of creatures caught within the web to suffocate. The party chose to wait them out for as long as the web would last, which would be 8 turns. I misspoke earlier. It was 42 workers that were in the grouping. Over the course of the 8 turns, 32 of the remaining workers suffocated, as well as 10 of the warriors. At the end of just as the spell was about to expire, the party burned the web, which killed the remaining 6 workers and injured the last 2 warriors. And over the course of 2 rounds of combat, the party was able to dispatch them as well. Earlier in the campaign, when the party ran across a coffer corpse, one of the things they obtained was a map which indicated that there was a treasure trove in a group of caves within this keep. That was the indication by the die rolls. And every time since then, whenever I've run across some sort of caves and caverns, I've been rolling to see when that treasure would come up, and it came up here. And at this point, my brain kind of went off the reservation, so to speak, and I pondered that this treasure trove, which included magic, could, being around those magic items, have affected the queen, which is a large 10 hit die creature, but doesn't have any kind of offensive capabilities. It's sort of the brains of the outfit. And I got to thinking, I guess my thoughts were probably influenced by the idea of the brain bugs from the Starship Troopers movie franchise. Would the magical radiation have given the queen perhaps some type of more conventional intelligence rather than just simple chemical control of the giant ants, and possibly even psionics? So as far as developing intelligence, I gave the queen a 1% chance for each hit die, so 10% for that, and another 5% per proximity per magic item, for a grand total of 30% chance. It rolled positive. Based on that result, I gave the queen a 14 intelligence based on 10 hit dice plus 4 magic items, and then I used that number and the table in the DMG for generating wisdom based on a creature's intelligence to generate a wisdom of 17, where the roll generated a wisdom of 17. And then I rolled the queen a charisma, since charisma could also affect whether or not you have psionics. You got a charisma of 13, so nothing particularly exceptional in terms of getting psionics. And so using those scores and giving a bonus again for HD and the magic items being present, I rolled for psionics and it came up positive. The queen rolled well in terms of the number of psionic abilities it would have. And one of the abilities I rolled up was domination. So when the party had dispatched the last of the ants, first they explored the cavern to the west, the cave to the west, because they hadn't seen exactly what was there, wanted to make sure no more surprises around there. And then they went around to confront the queen. When they did, the queen used domination to take control of Sven and use him to speak to the party. The queen explained that she really just wanted to be left alone with her brood, that she intended the party had no ill will toward the party, and that if they would spare her, she would give them a couple of cents, which would enable them to get a friendly response from any more giant ants they ran across on this level, and would also be able to give them a hint of where to go home to come back to her. This was after a positive reaction roll for the queen. I rolled a reaction roll for the party. They also had a very positive reaction roll. And so instead of killing the queen, they essentially made a deal with the queen to leave her and her brood alone. Although they did explain to her that at some point they would have to have the giant ants probably move on. The queen said that they could be quite helpful in keeping the keep policed, and the party agreed to consider that, and then the party moved on. With nothing left to explore in this part of the level, the party returned to the chimney up. Bernie successfully climbed it up to the next level because they agreed they should explore this, since it would be on the same level where they currently have their own quarters within the compound, as that level in another section of the hill is where they had initially found the orcs and killed them, and had run across the coffer corpse and the centipedes and things of that nature, and thought that was a small section closed off that they were using to store their treasure and their goods. Bernie lowered down a rope, and they continued east down a hallway for 30 feet, running across a door. Crashing through the door, they surprised a 5-headed hydra. Over the course of the surprise round and 2 other rounds of combat, the party was able to kill the hydra off. And in the 20 by 30 foot chamber that it was in, they found 4 pieces of jewelry and a magic spear. Moving down another 30-foot corridor to the east, they came into a 40 by 40 foot chamber, which was empty and had a door to the south in the southeast corner. Opening that door, they came on a 30-foot hallway that led south, with a door opening to the west. Opening that door, they found a passage leading southwest. 30 feet down, it branched off to the south, as well as continuing southwest. They followed the south branch into a 30 by 30 foot chamber. On the east wall was a large mirror segmented into 3 places, which seemed to show shadows of 3 different locations. As per usual, they did not deeply investigate this magical showing mirror. Returning back to the southwest corridor, they went the rest of the way to the end. It appeared to be a dead end, but it had a secret door leading to the west, which opened into a hallway which led west for 30 feet, then turned north for 30 feet, opening into a 30-foot by 20-foot chamber. This room was also empty, with 1 exit to the east. Following that 30 feet, they found another chimney leading up. Once again, Bernie climbed the chimney, lowered down a rope, and they found themselves in another hallway leading to the east, which ended in a mirror. This mirror appeared to show a 30 by 30 foot room and Bernie believed that it was the same room they had been in before. To prove it, he and Sven backtracked to that chamber, and the party could see them. And they could see the party. They stepped through in the middle segment of the mirror. They touched it and were able to come through to where the party was. The party spoke about for a while and considered that one of the other segments may lead to the other side of the mirror. I had them figure this out by rolling a couple of intelligence checks. And so they stepped through the mirror to the 30 by 30 foot chamber, and then eeny, meeny, mighty mowed one of the other segments and came out on the other side of the mirror. The hallway continued down and dead-ended with a door facing south. Opening that door, they entered a 30 by 30 foot room. The top was domed and appeared to look out on the night sky, and on the south wall was another mirror. Again, Bernie and Sven retreated to the other mirror in the corridor and used it to get into the 30 by 30 foot chamber in another part of the level, but it didn't seem like that mirror was connected to the third segment after they returned, and so they returned. The party pondered for a while, trying to figure out how they had not noticed anything or had any of their troops report anything like the dome on the top of the hill, and realized it must be camouflaged with some sort of illusion. There was a secret door to the west, which opened into a 20 by 30 foot room that appeared to be a library of sorts. Looking through the books, they realized that these books were related to astrology and the stars and the cosmos, and concluded that the domed room must be some sort of observatory used by some sort of mage or sage. On the south end of the 20 by 30 foot room, there was a secret door which, upon opening, they realized was a camouflaged door to the top of the hill. Having fully explored this section and finding no other ways in or out, they descended down 2 levels and went back to the main entry chamber that they had been using to start off at the exploration of the first upper level, a 60 by 40 foot chamber with various entrances in and out. They explored a previously unsearched corridor to the north, and about 30 feet in, ran into a section filled with gas. After some brief testing, it didn't seem to have any harmful effects, and as they walked through it, they felt themselves being a little stronger, possibly. And then they stumbled into a group of orcs. The party was on guard and not surprised, but the orcs were. And in a couple of surprise rounds, the party were able to kill several orcs, and then on the first round of serious combat, they won initiative, killing several others, and the remaining orcs surrendered and were turned over to their guards to escort them as prisoners. They continued north 50 feet and found a corridor to the east. Exiting there, they came into a 40 foot by 70 foot chamber. This chamber being empty, with another exit to the east further up the chamber, and an exit to the north. They take the west exit to a set of cross halls, and after going a further 20 foot west, they realize they've come across a secret door that they had previously spiked shut, that led to an area where they had run across a stream with a bridge across it. Returning through the cross corridor, they go north 30 feet, finding a secret door on the east side. They choose to spike that door shut and return to the large chamber and take the corridor to the north. They follow that corridor north for 60 feet, where it enters a 20 by 20 foot chamber with exits north and east. The chamber being empty, they proceed out the north passage for 30 feet to a dead end, but they do find a secret trap door into a room on the entrance floor of the keep that they had explored earlier. Returning back to the 20 by 20 foot chamber, they follow the corridor east for 30 feet, where it opens onto a 30 foot by 20 foot chamber filled with great deal of laboratory equipment, and also secret doors on the west wall, east wall, and north wall. Checking the west secret door first, it opens into a 10 by 10 foot room with jars of various types of gas and flasks of various types of gas. Opening the east secret door, it opens into a 10 by 10 foot room that seems to have a variety of ingredients stored in it of solid, liquid, and gaseous form. And with the day growing late and themselves growing fatigued, they spike to the north secret door and return back to their quarters to delve another day. The opening music of this podcast is Strength of the Titans, and the closing music is Late Night Radio, both by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. Thank you for listening to Phantom Thoughts. I would love to hear your feedback. You don't have to be part of the show. If you want to contact me and let me know, hey, these are for your eyes only, I just wanted to give you thoughts, ideas, response, and it's really for your eyes or ears only, that's absolutely fine. I'd love to hear from you either way. So just let me know when you contact me. Just, I don't want to be part of the show. There are lots of different ways you can contact me. You can send me an email at phantomthoughtspodcast@gmail.com. And that can be a regular email, or you can attach an audio file to it. You can use the message button on my podcast site on podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/phantom thoughts. You can contact me via my Google Voice number, 864-209-1441. You can contact me via SpeakPipe at www.speakpipe.com/phantom thoughts. You can contact me on Discord, The Pink Phantom. All this contact information is listed in the show notes of every episode. And thank you for those who call in. Thank you for those who don't call in. I appreciate you listening and hope you'll listen again next time. Until then, I hope you have a great day.